Day 11, 12. So today's June the 9th. Nothing really happened on June the 8th except for one. That the Hong Kong government decided that Ocean Park is ready to be reopened, even under such situations. So in Hong Kong, actually, a lot of things are opened. So wedding banquets available, funerals available, work was always available. All schools are available now. Even primary schools are on schedule to be reopened and resume classes face to face without concrete plans to prevent the virus except for wearing masks, sanitizing the area, and separate the students. The thing about Hong Kong classroom is that it's really tiny and small, so no matter how you separate the desk, it will still be cramped. So it sounds really, really ridiculous, right? Demonstrations, social gatherings are banned because of the virus, because of public health issues, and saying that and earlier this year the government said the definition about social gathering is that when people are in the same place with the same agenda, it counts as social gathering, and when that area has more than 8 people, then it counts as a violation and they will issue a ticket for it, which is $2,000. That was obviously used to stop any demonstrations and gatherings and protests, because even people are walking by on the streets near a protest area, they would still receive the tickets, and that happened for numerous times in the past months. But going to Ocean Park doesn't count as social gathering, doesn't count as mass gathering, and doesn't violate that 8 people limit. So someone actually said, since if protesting are prohibited because of being a social gathering more than 8, but going to Ocean Park doesn't, the rule doesn't apply to that, then how about we go to Ocean Park, then protest? The government's that stupid. And for today, June the 9th, it's the 1-year anniversary since the first 1 million people march, 1 million people rally on June the 9th, 2019 for protesting for the extradition bill, or protesting for withdrawing the extradition bill. So since, as I've said, social gatherings are banned, people can't really protest and rally legally, at least under the government's definition. It's no longer legal to do a rally and a protest, but people still came out, and they do a thing called a flowing type of rally, a circulation rally. So they are not going to one place and just sit there together, or going to point A to point B and dismiss. They use a method of walking around the area for repeatedly to increase the number of people on streets, and B, it doesn't count as you staying in one area, so the police are harder. It is harder for the police to arrest and to just block the flow of the people. And it happened in Central today, started from 6:30 p.m. and it lasted for a while. Then the police starting to do their usual stuff, going in, arresting a few people, and spraying pepper sprays to the citizens and also to the journalists. There are at least more than 30 people who are arrested. There must be more. And it's a relatively small scale protest, but it is amazing that despite of the situation under the coronavirus and also the prohibition issued by the government and the ruthlessness of the Hong Kong police, people are still willing to come out and to tell the people of the world that they are still fighting for democracy. The spirit is still here, even though there are more and more restrictions. Things are getting tougher. There's rally in small scales all over places. Even today during lunchtime, across the 18th district in various malls, people gathered and they sing the anthem of the protest, the Glory to Hong Kong, and they raise their flags, they say their demands, and it's impressive even for me to see that Hong Kong people are so resilient and so determined to get what they wanted. The longest lasting protest before this was the Occupy Central, which lasted for 81 days, if I was not mistaken. And the one that lasted the longest before the handover was the one the one that's supported by the Communist Party of China to be anti-colonial, anti-British governments. They call it the 67th riot. Directly translate from Chinese, at least. That one lasted for half a year, but this one lasted for an entire year. And it shows no sign of stopping or slowing down. People are finding new ways to do their part. People now realize if you physically come out to the protest area, yes, it shows the number, yes, it gathers people's heart, and yes, it is good for publicity. It is very, very inefficient in terms of achieving the goal of the protest, at least for the 5 demands, and also for asking the Chinese government to withdraw the national security law. People now shifted their focus onto Twitter, onto Facebook, onto Instagram, onto social media, onto Reddit. What they call is the international front line, which is explaining to people what happened in Hong Kong. telling people the difference between Hong Kong and China, why they are different, and telling people about the evil doings of the Communist Party, how they lied about, like, such as the coronavirus, how they lied about global security issues, their invasions, or the privacy security issues about the 5G network of Huawei, a lot of different stuff. Those asking for international support, those who contact foreign senators and foreign parliament members, foreign politicians, and government officials, those are way more effective under current situation. Like, people are hoping for the US sanction more than the actual protests happening in Hong Kong, because protests within Hong Kong can be oppressed and dealt with very easily once they march the PLA in, but international sanctions on China, which put pressure on China to properly deal with Hong Kong's issues, are another story. They Hong Kong protests doesn't cost China anything. Might be a slight dip in overall GDP, but not much. US sanctions or international sanctions, that's another story. China, despite being the second largest economy in the world, it is still a very, very poor country overall. The GDP per capita number is so low, it doesn't really count as a developed country. A recent report have shown that more than 900 million people. 900 million? More than 900 million people are getting 2,000 RMB per month or less in Hong Kong, in China, which most of them are farmers, but also shows you that the population and the wealth distribution of China, it's very uneven. It's a very poor country, and a lot of provinces they don't get even development. Some of them who were developed first, some of them who has the advantage of having a seaport, they develop faster than those who are in the inland in China. So people who lived in Guangzhou, who lived in Shanghai, who live in Beijing, those areas are the people who has the most wealth. The Guangdong province in general are the highest in GDP contribution in China. However, there are so many provinces in China who are mainly focusing on farming, and they don't have fertile lands. The farm production are very low, and people in China, there's no fair trade in China. They don't get an equal pay. So farmers in China are very poor, and they made up the majority of the populations. Businessmen, upper class people, middle class people, office workers, they earn a little bit more. They still don't earn as much in terms of money, because even office workers in China, they don't. Office worker in Hong Kong, they earn on average at least 15 to 20,000 for university graduates. A university graduate office worker in China, they earn about $5,000 to $6,000. People are really poor. So sanctioning China are really impactful on Chinese economy, especially after coronavirus, where a lot of provinces suffered a lot when people are forced out of the work. There's no factory workers, there's no production, and there's no output, there's no products. And a lot of them are working in such an environment where they can't work at home, they were laid off, and overall the GDP dropped by a lot. So sanctioning China are much more effective in putting pressure on the Chinese government to respect the Hong Kong people's demand, other than like Hong Kong people shouting and doing whatever they can within Hong Kong. The second bit of news today was that Cathay Pacific, a Hong Kong-based airline company, and they are going bankrupt. And the Hong Kong government decided to invest in Cathay Pacific, which originally that looks fine, but Cathay Pacific was a private company, and it was owned by Swire and owned by China Airlines. So usually when company went out of money, they ask for the investors to invest more money into keeping the business afloat. The Hong Kong government does not have any shares of Cathay Pacific. So it gets really, really weird in terms of being a market, especially when Hong Kong is a free and open market. It's not a planned economy. So the government intervenes with a company's investments and cash flows that's really, really specific and very rare scene to see in Hong Kong. But what came after this was that the China Airlines are gonna buy the shares from Swire. So what happens was government pays Swires to get the shares, and they sell it to China Airlines. Basically, Hong Kong paying for China Airlines to purchase Swire's shares in Cathay Pacific. So after this process, China Airlines will have the majority of the shares of Cathay Pacific, which makes that Cathay Pacific might very possibly be under China Airlines. And China Airlines is a state-owned company. So, and what's under Cathay Pacific was 3 different airlines: Cathay Pacific itself, and Dragonair, and also Hong Kong Express, which is Cathay Pacific was the middle to premium choice, Dragonair was the middle class choice, and Hong Kong Express was the economy choice, was the cheap flight choice. In Hong Kong, there's 4 airlines, except for the 3 above. There's also a Hong Kong airline, but that was owned and run by South China Airlines. So what happens after this acquisition will be that all airlines company who based in Hong Kong will be controlled by China. This is a blatant invasion into Hong Kong's economy, which go along with a lot of acquisition that happens recently. A lot of Chinese company who are state-owned or state-funded, they purchased a lot of like restaurant groups, a lot of retail groups, a lot of like stores and a lot of department stores, various different kind of business, which makes a lot of them are now actually state-owned companies. And that just shows you how China wanted to grip on Hong Kong and how desperate they are to do such things. Because Hong Kong is a free economy. I can't stress much more. That was what makes Hong Kong a successful place. There are no state-owned companies. There are only government-invested businesses, which there are just a few. Disneyland, which is a joint venture between Disney and the Hong Kong government, and which makes the Hong Kong government pay for all the loss that caused by Disneyland. So Disneyland in Hong Kong doesn't really operate quite well. Same thing goes with the MTR. When the MTR loses money, it just asks the Hong Kong government to give them money because they are the majority shareholder. And also the electricity supply company where Hong Kong government has a share. But they are all private companies. The government helping another private company to acquire a private company's shares using government funding. This is as communist as it could be in Hong Kong. And a lot of business people are complaining, why are you saving Cathay Pacific just because they are going bankrupt instead of saving other industries? Because even Hong Kong wasn't hit as hard by the coronavirus as other people or other places. It still severely damaged the economy. And a lot of shops went bankrupt. A lot of even shops that are pro-government are losing a lot of profit. But the Hong Kong government decided to help Cathay Pacific instead of others. Like this only happened recently. Like in my memories, this only happened once, which was the US government giving money or buying shares of General Motors. But General Motors has a strategic position in the motor industry in America. When General Motors bankrupt, there are so many people who will be affected when the government can't actually deal with those people who lost their jobs. And that was General Motors is such a conglomerate. It basically, when General Motors go down, the entire motor industry would go down. But this is Cathay Pacific we're talking about. It is not like Cathay Pacific was their own private company who are not owned by any other shareholders, and it's not the shareholders who doesn't have any money who are also bankrupt and can't support the company. No, they have a lot of cash. But still, the Hong Kong government decided to buy the shares for another private company, for China Airlines. This is even worse than the General Motors thing. The General Motors deal was after the economic crisis after 2008 or 2020, 2012, the economy doesn't hit as hard as 2012 in Hong Kong. The investors haven't even invested back into Cathay Pacific, and they realize they don't have enough money to do so, so they ask for the government to help. No, the Hong Kong government just stepped in, pays for the loans, and give the shares to China Airlines. In the future, in the expectable future, more and more of these will happen. More and more brands that were proudly being from Hong Kong, with the Hong Kong identity will be state-owned. They won't be a Hong Kong company, but a China company. It could be expected in many areas, like in supermarket and major retail outlets, in electricity, in telecommunication, where it's slowly happening. A lot of network providers are going to be having China money invested into it, especially when 5G technology comes. Hong Kong they will choose Huawei instead of others, without a thought. China Mobile was an established mobile network provider company in Hong Kong already. They could acquire other companies like Free, HK, SmarTone, to make them the largest mobile network provider in Hong Kong. Restaurants are already... The Hong Kong McDonald's are not owned by McDonald's itself, but owned by a Chinese company. The distribution, so even McDonald's, who are American, are actually Chinese in Hong Kong. That also goes for a lot of different retail groups. So, yeah. Well, people in Hong Kong are trying to build up their own yellow economy circle, their own local economy circle, to use their money to feed back into the loop, to make an impact on the side and in the Hong Kong economy and the Hong Kong market, where they only support those who support them, to support their cause. China, on the other hand, they are acquiring all the large groups, and possibly wanting to control every asset of your life. Plus, using the big data to monitor your actions, using surveillance camera on the streets to recognize your face, your positions, what did you do, where did you go, logging your every activity online. In Hong Kong might not have concentration camp, but it will soon be a place where there's no freedom. And the credit score system that were implemented in some parts of China, we can only expect they would do such things in a very near future, where the China government has no patience on Hong Kong. They just want the people of Hong Kong to be submissive and listen. They don't want any fuss, they don't want any protests, they don't want any riots, they don't want to hear the voices of the Hong Kong people, since they never actually listened. they think it's mercy when you protest, when we never march a PLA in during our protest. They think that's mercy. They think we are tolerating your behaviors. We are tolerating your protests. They won't actually listen. They just think that you have to listen to me. I will wait, but you will have to listen to me. So yeah, probably in a very near future, there won't be a Hong Kong company anymore. There will only be a Hong Kong China company, or even just a China company.